There are exits both down this hallway and through this building over here, with a muster point out in the parking lot. So, and having said that, we'll start with our delegations, and we're going to switch the two delegations. We're going to start with Pioneer Fireplace, Comox Fireplace and Patio. If somebody would like to move her seat. Excellent. And if you'd like to come up, we'll get your microphone going. And I'm assuming there's no PowerPoint or anything?
No.
Excellent. All right.
Good afternoon. I've put a lot of my thoughts on paper, so I'm just going to read from this. Thank you for allowing us to present our perspective on the issue of air quality in the Comox Valley. My name is Chris Bowen. I'm the General Manager of Pioneer Fireplace. This is Tommy Whitmer, the owner of Comox Fireplace, and this is Aaron Struch, the owner of Pioneer Fireplace. We are speaking today on behalf of several local businesses, including hearth retailers, chimney sweeps, wet certified inspectors, and firewood suppliers. We are also presenting with the full support of our National Trade Association, the HPBAC. I'd first like to express our concern for and willingness to address the Comox Valley airshed issues, particularly the extremely poor air quality that occurs here during inversion events. We recognize the negative impacts that these events can and do have on members of the public who have existing health issues. We also recognize that these events will disproportionately impact elderly and young children. As members of the community, we all share these concerns. The hearth industry has made tremendous advancements towards cleaning up wood-burning appliances over the course of the last 25 years. Prior to 1994, wood stoves and open fireplaces would release into the atmosphere anywhere from 60 to 100 grams of particulate matter per hour. The most recent iteration of the EPA minimum standards that is being adopted here in British Columbia requires that all new stoves will have to produce no more than 2 grams of particulate matter per hour. This represents a tremendous investment in terms of both time and money by the hearth industry in order to effect such a revolutionary change in a relatively short period of time. To give you some real-world perspective on this, if I burn my high-efficiency wood stove for 12 hours a day and my neighbor across the street burns his open masonry fireplace for 3 hours on just one evening, I would have to burn my stove for 12.5 days to produce the same amount of particulate matter that my neighbor would produce in one evening. From a consumer perspective, one of the most striking advantages that our customers experience by using a new higher efficiency wood-burning stove or insert is that they significantly reduce the amount of wood or fuel that is required to adequately heat their homes. This is particularly important to low-income families who rely on wood heating as the only truly affordable way to heat their homes. During the heating season, one of the most consistent reasons we as retailers hear as a motivation for consumers to install a wood heating system is the often crippling cost of using other heat sources, particularly electricity. An average size home can be heated using wood for around $750 to $1,000 per year. For many people, that is 1 to 2 months of heating with electricity. There are some people who may be able to afford a $1,000 electric bill. They may not like to pay it, but they can afford it. There are, however, a great many people in our communities that quite literally can't afford these type of exorbitant bills and find themselves in situations where very difficult choices may have to be made. We often hear that people find themselves in a position where a choice has to be made between keeping themselves warm and eating. These are not speculative hypotheticals. We deal with people like this every day. I would also ask you to consider that the purchase of and installation costs of wood stoves and their required components are significantly less than other heating appliances such as heat pumps or gas furnaces. Another serious issue that is worth addressing is the ever-present threat of power failures to people all across Vancouver Island and surrounding Gulf Islands. A stark example of this occurred in December of 2018 when a severe storm hit Vancouver Island, causing widespread power outages. A total of 756,000 people were affected. The most disastrous element of this weather event was the duration that many people found themselves without power. In some cases, people were without power for more than a week. We heard more than one story of families coming together in the home of a neighbor who had a wood stove. This allowed them to stay warm and cook food through these difficult times. Again, these are not speculative hypotheticals. These were the real experiences of far too many people. Depriving people of this type of energy security could prove to be catastrophic in future severe weather events. When it comes to clean air and the part wood stoves play in that, clean-burning, high-efficiency wood stoves are not the primary issue. The primary culprit is old, inefficient, often non-certified wood appliances, and the challenge is how to get rid of them. An excellent tool we have utilized in the past is the Wood Stove Exchange Program. Although the programs have had mixed results as you go from region to region in terms of air quality, it is easy to make the argument that some regions have been very successful in improving local air quality, while others have not. What is more difficult to determine is why this is the case. There are many possible reasons that could affect the success of an exchange program, such as marketing, income levels, industry involvement, etc. As the manager of a business that operates in 5 separate regional districts, I can tell you that the one-size-fits-all approach to the wood stove exchange programs likely lends itself greatly to the success and or failure the regions have experienced. I'd like to use the municipality of Courtenay as an example of how a more targeted and restructured exchange program could be implemented. In the 2017 University of Victoria study, in which air quality was monitored for a period of time, several maps were produced showing which areas of the city had the worst air quality. Without knowing these areas particularly well, I accurately speculated that these were older areas filled with homes using old, inefficient wood-burning appliances. By using these maps, the wood stove exchange program, with the help of industry, could target these areas to have these older appliances removed and replaced with newer, more efficient wood-burning appliances. Targeted wood stove exchange programs have occurred in other locations and resulted in tremendous success. The most notable of these successes occurred in Libby, Montana. Libby is a small town nestled in a Rocky Mountain valley. The inhabitants of Libby used wood heat as their primary heat source, and as a consequence, suffered from very poor air quality due to cool weather inversions, very similar to what is experienced in the Comox Valley. An added complication in Libby was that the citizens were predominantly low income. The adverse health effects experienced by the community at large became unacceptable, prompting governments and industry to combine forces to solve the problem. Over the course of the next number of years, every stove in Libby was changed out and the air quality improved dramatically. Although this is an extreme example of a targeted exchange program and one not likely to be repeated, it does demonstrate that a collaborative approach to air quality improvement combined with a specifically tailored change-out program can result in significant improvement in a troubled community. It would be quite probable that had the government and industry not taken action as they did, Libby would have the same poor air today as they did in 2008. This would likely be due to the fact that the community is lower income and that wood appliances tend to have very long lifespans. We believe that the CVRD decision to remove wood stoves from the list of appliances eligible for a rebate disproportionately disadvantages lower income people and people living in rural communities, without having the intended outcome of reducing the installation of wood-burning appliances. To summarize, the wood industry on Vancouver Island has had a large impact on the economy, employing more than 1,000 people in high-paying jobs ranging from firewood supply to manufacturing. The broader hearth industry has made tremendous investment in terms of time and money towards the improvement of wood-burning heating systems, meeting and exceeding extremely strict standards set by the EPA. Wood heating has been a long-standing and central feature of the Vancouver Island heating landscape, much more so than perhaps in any other region in North America. The use of wood stoves and the degree to which they are relied upon is due to many factors, including cost and security, neither of which can be understated. The importance of wood stove exchange programs operating within their intended parameters is key to this discussion, as they have most certainly proven to be successful in many other jurisdictions. I think it's fair to say, however, that industry has to play a much larger role in getting the old inefficient stoves out of circulation and replacing them with newer, more efficient options. We haven't done as good a job as we probably could have. As a major stakeholder in Vancouver Island, and more specifically the Comox Valley, we would like to emphasize our desire and willingness to be involved in a collaborative effort to improve the air quality in the Comox Valley. We believe this should include all of us in discussions in which our perspective and expertise could be mightily informative and help towards achieving the desired outcome of clean air in the Comox Valley. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris. And I'll open up to the board if there's any questions or comments. And we have one from Director Grant.
Thank you. Well, that was interesting to hear from you guys, because that's pretty much a repeat of everything I said when this whole event was coming on. I'm not sure if you're aware that we have an airshed advisory group that we're putting together, and it might be an area that you guys could attend the meetings, or at least be part of, so that you can bring that perspective to to that group as they're going to be going through all of this. But, one of the things that we really looked at was we have a lot of lower income areas in in all of our communities, and the way we were trying to do it originally was that it would have a bigger impact on some of those, and the targeting piece as well. So we looked at all of that. The vote didn't go that way, but I think that it would be good if you guys could get on the Airshed Advisory Committee and bring that perspective.
We would really appreciate that, yeah. And I think in terms of something like the targeted approach, industry has a necessary role to play in that. I mean, we know how to do that. We know how to get our our product to market. So I mean, certainly, yeah, we would love to be involved.
Right. And Director Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, guys, for the presentation. I just want to echo that sentiment, and I think we talked a little bit about the Airshed Advisory Group. So I don't know what the composition exactly is. Maybe our staff want to remind us. But if there was an opportunity for a representative from your group to maybe be a delegation to them or otherwise, that would be really great. So that's all I have to say. Thanks very much.
Yep. Mr. Chair, staff of the municipalities and regional district have been working on a report that we're bringing forward in September that will give you advice and recommendations on creating this. And yes, representation from industry will be part of that.
And that was my understanding as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And alternate Director Scoville.
Thank you, Chair. Just on behalf of Area C, rural area with lots of people experiencing the kind of challenges that you're talking about, on behalf of the Saratoga Miracle Beach Residents Association, very much appreciate your remarks and encourage those. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, I don't see any further things, and I did look up a little bit of the Libby Montana stuff and to see kind of how it might reflect. They I think worked through some federal government stuff, but seems somewhat similar in many ways. So
Very extreme example.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks very much for your presentation today.
Thank you for your time.
All right, and next let me get back to the right page here. I think it's Alan Murphy from Valley Comfort Systems. Do you want to receive that? Oh, well, before you start, we'll call a vote on receipt of the presentation. All those in favor? Any opposed? So that passes, and we'll move receipt of Pioneer Fireplace.
Hello. Hi. My name is Alan Murphy. I'm the president of Valley Comfort Systems, a manufacturer in Penticton, British Columbia. And we predominantly make wood stoves, and we sell them all over the world. I also have here with me is the sales manager for Pacific Energy, a significantly large manufacturer in Duncan, here on the island. And I thought Corey Iverson, I'd like Corey just to say a couple of words, and then I'll get into mine if that's okay.
Is that okay with everybody? I'm not on the list, but
It's a 10-minute,
okay.
So you guys will be
Good.
sharing the 10 minutes.
So I'm going to just get a little bit higher perspective, and that is we deal with this type of thing all the time. That's what we do in the fireplace business. But what I have seen in an area where wood burning is obviously part of the community and the culture, there's access to firewood. It rarely, if ever, goes away, but there is people that manage it better than others. And for instance, I'll give you an example of Montreal. Montreal outright jammed through a ban, and they have repealed it since because there was such an outcry. So then they looked, how do we make it better? And so what I'd like to say is there is ways to make it better. What I brought here is an example. That is an old wood stove. That's about 80 grams of particulate per hour per stove. That is a modern wood stove. And so if you have one of these, you can throw 20 or 30 of these out. And that is a true measure. We measure it every day. We have our own labs. This is real world stuff. So the trick is how do we get them in? How do we get people that can burn and still want to burn onto new stoves? And I'll tell you, the one thing that we never talk about is you need to provide access to clean, dry firewood. Because if you don't, then this becomes relevant again. So from an economic point of view, I'd also like to add a few words. We are the biggest employer in the Cowichan Valley besides the Crofton Mill. We employ 200 people. I've been there for over 30 years. And there is 5 major manufacturers in BC. We are worldwide. All of us are worldwide. We are the ground zero for fireplaces. So we would hope that communities like this would help us show how it can be done properly. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to put this down. I'm not as tall as these other guys. So my presentation, which you all have, everybody has a copy of this? Do they? No? Okay. A lot in my presentation is a repeat of what's already been said, except I tend to take it to a slightly higher level in that I'm also the chair of the Government Affairs Committee for the Hearth Products Association of Canada. But the same basic underlying things are relevant across the country. Our industry has done all the hard work. My company in Penticton, we employ 75 people. We are probably 60% of all our business is export. Like Pacific Energy, we're seen as a leader in the wood manufacturing end of things. And all the new EPA regulations that are coming to the fore on May 15th of 2020 have brought our industry to a place where we've revolutionized the wood stove industry. Corey had a very good demonstration of the particulate matter emissions from a stove, an old non-certified stove, to a new one. We've done the hard work. We have now given you the tools in order to clean up the airshed. Now we need to find a way is how do we get those tools into the marketplace? How do we be a partner with you? Because we're 100% behind what you're trying to do to keep a clean airshed because we live in it. This is my home, and I want it to be clean just as much as you do. Within some of the things we come across in the industry, there's very little modern, clear data as to what wood stoves, how much they actually contribute to the airshed. And a lot of these studies use stove emission levels that are back to the 2011 to 2013 to 2015, and they're way out of date compared to what we do today. Like the emission standards from a wood stove prior to 2015, after the first EPA, was down to 7.5 grams. Then post 2015 to May 15th of next year, it's down to 4.5 grams. After that point, we're down to 2 grams. And I mean, wood stove manufacturers are surpassing those levels as well. So the industry has done a tremendous amount in order to give you the tools you need. Previously, they talked about the longevity of wood stoves. Herein lies the crux of the problem that we have. A wood stove's lifespan is anywhere from 30 to 50 years. An open fireplace's lifespan is the lifespan of a home. So how do we tackle that issue? Because if we remove the current generation of wood stoves out of the marketplace or hinder their sale, you have zero effect on the current airshed because we're not dealing with the fundamental problem, which is the existing stock of non-compliant or open fireplaces. Okay. New technologies. I mean, like I said, the industry has done tremendous work there. But real-world performance, too, is very important that what's put through the lab is also repeated in the home. Corey alluded to moisture content in wood. It's still very, very important moisture content in wood. The newer stoves handle it better than most, so we have improved that with the technology, but it is an issue that needs to be addressed, that the wood supply is plentiful and monitored or controlled is a big thing towards cleaning up the airshed. And we have a great forestry industry. Driving up from, I came across through Victoria this morning. You can't see the wood for the trees, guys. It's everywhere. So we have a huge natural, renewable energy source in our forestry departments, right, in our forests. We need to encourage our forestry, and our wood business can be a small piece of that moving forward. Apart from cleaner stoves, we have much more efficient stoves. A more efficient stove means that we're burning less wood to create the same amount of heat. That's a huge deal when you think of the emission levels within the airshed. Because yes, we have grams levels, you could measure it per kilogram of wood, but if you're using half the amount of wood, those levels are greatly reduced even further. So again, that bioenergy, we're hearing these buzzwords all the time, but wood stoves seem to be excluded from bioenergy as a source of future energy. I mean, we've got the energy here on the island. Why aren't we using it more effectively and in a clean, responsible way? It's responsible heating, responsible use of that energy. Everybody talked earlier on about the demographics. I don't need to go into that again. It is the people in our communities who can least afford to buy expensive heating options that are more dependent on wood. We need to encourage the availability of wood. We need to encourage the availability of stoves, but in a very responsible manner. Okay. Jobs. The heating industry in BC is huge. We have 3,000 direct employees in manufacturing firms in BC. Think of the number of knock-on jobs. We've probably got another 12,000 direct jobs who are dependent upon our industry in BC. On Vancouver Island, you have almost 400 direct jobs with a knock-on effect of probably about 1,200 to 1,500 jobs here on the island. So it's a huge piece of our economy. So how do we promote that economy? How do we keep it sustainable and work with industry to help move forward for the future? This corner of BC, the Lower Mainland all the way over to Penticton, probably accounts for 20% of all hearth products sold across North America. It's huge. This industry is huge and a major contributor to our economy. Solutions. Removing old inventory we talked about. How do we do that? Well, when a house is being sold, you can put restrictions on the house being sold. That an open fireplace must have an insert put into it, or a non-compliant heating product must be removed from that house before it's sold. From councillors' viewpoints, very important, because obviously you want elections and votes and things, and outright bans always go, oh my God, you're killing us, why are you affecting us so much? This is a method that other jurisdictions have used that is not targeted at a specific group and is sporadic in its implementation. It takes time, there's no doubt. It takes a long time in order to get this process through. But if you don't start somewhere, you'll never get to that end. Change out programs. As an industry, we've talked about this. We are proactive and have always supported change out programs, both financially, education-wise, support-wise. We have the tools in the industry. We're there to help move forward with change out programs. The key thing with change out programs is to be very targeted. That's the most important thing.
You're at 10 minutes and we have at least one question. So how are you close to finishing?
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Okay. One example too was cash for clunkers. There's been very successful programs run where a cash amount is paid just to remove a stove, or in those cases, old cars or lawnmowers out of the system. They're readily available online to see them. And education. We all need to do a better job in education. So that's my lot. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Let me just get back to... Right, and Director Hamir, you had a question or comment?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Alan, for your presentation. And, I would like to echo some of the comments about having the manufacturers and the suppliers on this Airshed Council, because you've obviously come up with some really good ideas of how we can get and move the needle on the issue. I just wanted to talk about one point that you didn't have a chance to talk about, was the wet wood, and just how it's possible that we can, either license companies, that's what you've mentioned, but how do we get wet wood out of the system? Because it is a really big problem in the valley, especially, coming to the end of fire burning season. I think people start to get very desperate and there aren't large quantities of cured wood.
Now, going back to harping on the old non-compliant product, deals with wet wood very, very badly. Yeah. Newer, more modern product burns wet wood in a cleaner way than, say, an old one. Having said that, wet wood is a concern. Various jurisdictions, we were just talking about this in the car on the way up, there are no wood lots up here. Am I correct in saying it? In most of the jurisdictions, Corey, if you want to add in on this.
Yeah, just because I've dealt with this recently, if you're out on the East Coast, it's actually a real business. You will have a wood lot. It will be dry. It will be under some type of major storage. People can walk. They can drive their truck in. They can dump a load of wood in, or they will deliver it for you. It is a real business with real people working at it, and it is licensed like a business, which means there's some you can put some restrictions on it, and they're always working on next year's stuff, which is exactly what needs to happen. Now, most responsible wood burners are doing that on their own. They're always rotating their fuel, but most people don't get around to it, don't have the wherewithal, can't afford it, and so the quick answer is have some place they can go to buy wood that's dry, and they will come.
I'm wondering if you, as suppliers of wood stoves, do you make recommendations on
Yes,
who
we
to? Okay,
Yes, we do.
so you've got a list of folks that you recommend, anyways,
For
for
to
supplier.
do that here?
Yes.
No.
Not in the Comox Valley.
No, I don't think anybody recommends, from a manufacturer, we have very tight guidelines on what we can say and don't say, but most of our manuals, we will recommend dry season cordwood.
Right.
But I can tell you from my experience is if you create a place where people can go and get it, they'll just go get it. That's the easiest thing. And the other thing is they will deliver it, and the problem just evaporates,
Yeah. Okay.
like that.
And one other thing, we do quite a bit of informational flow between ourselves and the Ministry of the Environment in BC. And we actually supply 300 or 400 moisture meters every year to the ministry. And again, it's another promotional idea in order to encourage people to be responsible and know what the moisture content is.
Yeah,
in their
and
wood.
I'll
That's a
add-
big deal.
I'll add to that is a lot of people think seasoned wood means I got it in the summer. And they literally think it's okay. They're not trying to get around it. They think they got good wood. They don't realize it needs to sit for a year. So just back to what Alan said, the education is key. I've seen a lot of areas where they will do, basically, they will publish in the newspaper just lists of things to do and don't with your wood stove and did you knows, and just stuff like that. It's just common sense when you're in the industry, not so much outside, and it can go a long way. It makes, and like I say, burning dry wood makes a big difference really quick.
And we have graphics to help you with this education process should you need them.
Excellent. And our regional district does do training workshops, I believe, in the past. So
Burn It Smart program. Yeah.
something like that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
was that it? And Director Arbor.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I mean, I got a wood stove at home. I'm on Hornby Island, probably the poorest area in terms of income in the region. A lot of people have wood stoves. And at the same time, you know, I think when we came in as a board, it's actually one of our strategic priorities. We don't have many of them, but to improve air quality in the valley, it's a serious issue. And the past programs haven't moved the dial, and it kind of makes you think, you know, why is that? That's why there's going to be this Airshed Council to kind of delve more into it and make a series of more fulsome recommendations. I think the industry, I mean, we lifted the subsidy, that was a measure that was brought in, but it seems like the industry seems to have bigger opportunities than subsidies in terms of what you've managed to achieve, in my opinion. So I was forced to change my wood stove because of insurance, you know, through the wet certification process. So I think there's other tools than subsidies or other things if the goal is to get everybody on under the energy efficient wood stoves. And there's been progress. I mean, on Hornby, when all the insurers started calling, a lot of people had to fork out some money, and a lot of poor households had to fork out some money to upgrade their wood stoves. Is that moving the dial enough? When you talk about the wet wood, yeah, it's a little bit better with my new wood stove, but the problem you have with those poor households too is a lot of them do not buy a year in advance. They don't have the cash in their pockets to buy in a year. So I think a lot of the arguments you make about the impact on poor households, there's already existing conditions that don't support them burning dry wood. So it's a complex problem, and I'm really glad you came today, but I think that's why I'm hopeful that you know, kind of multi-stakeholder group like the Airshed Council will come up, because at the end of the day we do want to improve air quality in the valley, and we haven't been able to do that in a number of years. So if we come up with creative solutions, great. Yep. And otherwise, I think we'll need to decide whether that's truly a priority that we want to keep focusing on, or whether you need some kind of drastic action. So I just thought I'd say that so that we're all on the same page as to how this resolution came about, because I don't want to just say that you know, this board's past resolution was just an off-the-cuff thing. It was probably one of the most hotly debated topic as this table so far this term. So I just want to thank you, all of you actually, for coming here, and I really appreciated the information.
You're welcome. Just one last statement. We being in this industry for this long, we've seen this many times, and I can tell you, it can get better, it can be fixed. You just have to get a plan. You have to recognize that there is things that we can do and get after it. And we've seen it successfully resolved many, many times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Many times. Yeah. And just a couple of comments on what you've said. One is, when we don't include wood stoves, it's a tacit condemnation of wood stoves as being something that's lesser or more environmentally harmful than another type of heating appliance. It's not correct. The current generation of wood stoves are as clean, if not cleaner, than anything else on the market, so precluding them is not a good idea.
Well, if I may, I look forward to those arguments. I wasn't the one making the case, but some directors around here were making the case to just do heat pumps as a subsidy. So that's how far we were. Okay. And so I would love to see the case that heat pumps generate more particulates than wood stove. But that's to take that one to the Airshed Council and have those debates.
Yeah.
Thanks, Director Eber. And Director Moore.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thanks so much for your presentation and for the previous one as well. Yeah, I think as Director Arbor said, it's a very complex issue. Certainly, as being a Courtenay City Councillor, we know there are some real hot spots in terms of you know, places where people are really suffering from air quality. And I think as you referred to, the responsible use is a big factor, whether you have a new stove or an older one. And I guess I'm wondering I know you can't really speak for everybody in your industry, but would you say that you would go a step further to have more aggressive kind of education, or in terms of follow-up and monitoring of sales that you've made to homes, that kind of thing? Because I think, you know, some of these programs are voluntary, I mean, I'm not saying to police things necessarily, but I think it needs to be an ongoing education if we're going to continue the use of wood stoves, because we have some really, really bad areas in our region. But
I think you'll find, and Chris may allude to that point, that we already do things like this on the sale of a new current product.
You continue to monitor
Yeah,
sure. If you could
it was one of the points I had mentioned in my presentations about a targeted approach, like taking those maps with the problem areas, looking at that, and as retailers, I mean, these guys are manufacturers, we're the ones who deal directly with with the people, is actually going into those communities and saying, and you know, doing direct marketing campaigns. Maybe taking the tool of the change-out program makes it a little more difficult, because there's a possibility that, you know, in specific areas those could be enhanced. You know, there's different ways that it can be approached, but, you know, recognizing the problem, and those maps are an invaluable source of information, because you know where you got to go, you know.
But with the sale of a modern appliance, there is definitely follow-up by the retailers after the sale to ensure that it's being used properly and continues to be used properly.
Because I do appreciate definitely our rural citizens and those on low income, and I spoke to this when we were grappling with this, you know, a few months back, that there are huge barriers for folks who live in rural areas, and it's their primary source of heating, and also for folks on low incomes, and I don't want people to be suffering more than they already are. But I think we do need some more, you know, aggressive ways of dealing with this. And I'd be happy to keep hearing some really productive ideas on this. So thanks for coming.
The goal is the non-compliant and open fireplaces that are currently in the community at the moment. That's really where the answer to a more rapid change within the airshed lies.
Mm-hmm.
And the wood, clean, as Corey had mentioned, the clean, seasoned wood is, I mean, for our customers who we deal with directly, I mean, the stoves don't even put out as much heat as they would using wet wood as opposed to dry wood. It's very important, and our company and Comox Fireplace are looking at ways that we can try and stabilize that fuel supply on our own, which is something in the past we haven't directly involved ourselves in, but we're starting to see it as an issue. So. Yeah,
and a couple more points quickly. One more point is that obviously people living in poverty have a million and one stressors, and heating their homes is one of them. So that creates another barrier for folks to be able, it's like, do I deal with my, all the other issues that I'm dealing with, health issues and feeding my family and all these other things, or am I going to responsibly use my, what's going to be the priority of the day? So I think that's another consideration. And I did have another point, but what was it? It'll come to me. I do this every so often. I just, I think that there's a lot of complexities to the issue, and
there is. There definitely is. And just to that point you just made.
Use the microphone, please.
Sorry. Most people, when in communities that can least afford these things, buy their wood as needed. They don't buy it years in advance. So having a good regulated woodlot system allows them to drive down the road and pick up a small amount of wood. But we know it's controlled and it's regulated, or at least in a form, instead of going into the forest and trying to cut their own when you know it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. I remembered my other point. I just wondered if you could give me cost of one of these high efficiency premier stoves, because we were discussing that, and we didn't.
We can go all the way from, let's say, $1,400 to $5,000,
okay.
but they all meet the 2 gram standard.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Different qualities and looks and warranties, but they all will, if they're certified 2020, they're
okay.
2
So
grams.
so that's the range in price.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
And Director Swift.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Lots of food for thought here. I'm wondering if you could comment on pellet stoves.
Yes. Have you got all afternoon? Pellet stoves are very good in that it's a measured fuel input into a pellet stove. But like any heating source or any fuel source, they have upsides and downsides. The positive is you can control a pellet stove's heat output very accurately because it's a metered fuel rate. Unfortunately, a pellet stove is dependent upon electricity to function. It requires regular maintenance to function properly. And the supply of pellet fuel has been fairly intermittent in the past number of years. So while pellets were seen in the past as being the answer to a more controlled wood stove, the reality is that it has not done that. And in fact, the modern technologies in wood stoves are probably catching up on, if not surpassing, the efficiencies, the emissions, and the controllability of a pellet stove without the requirement of electricity.
And I would also add that, and we manufacture pellet stoves as well. They are not, their wood stove is still cheaper to burn because pellets, because they're manufactured and have to be shipped, the fuel is more expensive. So it is more convenient. It comes in a bag. You get to pour it in. You don't have to chop it, but it is not cheaper. So.
The emissions levels on a pellet stove are equal to that of a modern wood stove. But what's never taken into account is the fact that you have to take the wood from the forest, send it to a pellet mill, have it manufactured into pellet fuel, put in plastic bags, and shipped all the way back to its consumption source. That's never taken into account when emission levels are looked at with pellet products.
Thank you.
Excellent. And Director Grant.
Thanks. Well, thanks for reigniting the debate that just won't go away. I originally started this, so so thanks for that. But I just thought the original motion that came on this was the rebate would be $1,500 for a wood stove, which the intent was if you went into those poor areas, it would actually buy the wood stove for you. Along with that, it would be targeted, and also you would be made to go to an education seminar before you could qualify for the grant. So that was the original intent, and then it went on for days and days and days. And we got to where we are, which, you know, honestly, I don't even know where we are with it anymore. But the one issue that, you know, kept coming up that I heard was the wet wood issue. So if there's a way around the wet wood issue, for me, you know, that was the original intent anyway. So just I thought you guys might want to know that.
Probably the fastest, quickest effect you could have is dealing with your wood, and then start with change outs and stuff. But if you could actually control the fuel source like right away, then you would actually notice an improvement right away. So.
And I just want to add, as retailers, we've for probably the last 3 months been taking some very serious looks at how we can do that. And there's a number of directions we're trying to go. It benefits obviously the community at large in terms of air quality, but our business as well. I mean, you know, people's chimneys plug. There's a lot of problems that can occur from wet wood that don't help us. So.
I'll just give you an anecdotal example. We do a display for wet wood where we have 2.5 gallon jugs of water and 65 pounds worth of well-seasoned wood. So at 35% moisture content, that's the amount of water in the wood. And we say to people, here, take that water, 2.5 gallons, and put it in your wood stove and then light it. And they go, don't be stupid. Of course you can't. Why? You're going to put it out. It's water. Well, that's what you're doing with wet wood. Okay, so a graphic of that nature is very good at the education process for people to understand what they're doing when they're using wet wood.
Right. And Director Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks again. This is clearly an issue that's going to take some time to resolve,
yes.
And you guys have acknowledged that. And I guess I just want to show my appreciation and acknowledgement of how great it is actually to have industry at the table with us. And you've outlined some programs that I don't think we could pull off as a government. So it's really great to see that you guys are willing to step up and put some energy into this.
And the manufacturers we do contribute on a regular basis to this type of thing.
Yeah.
If our dealers would come to us, say we want to do a change out in conjunction with the local government, we almost always say yes.
Yeah, I've never said no.
Yeah, and to be clear, I know our staff could do it, but it would probably cost a lot more.
We're good at it.
And you guys, yeah, you guys are really good at it. Sort of stuff.
And what's more important is it's targeted.
And I'm picking up everything you're laying down. So I just wanted to thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry for being so passionate.
No, that's okay.
Excellent. I don't see any further comments from the table here, but you know, I just want to, you know, again, thank you for coming and talking about this. I know when I moved here about 16 years ago, one of the features of the house that we purchased was a wood stove. I have a high suspicion around technology and electricity, and so having a fireplace I thought was a nice thing to have. It was a early 80s wood stove, I assume. There was no stamp on it. There was nothing saying anything about this thing. So we ordered our firewood like from the newspaper, I think. There was somebody who said they were selling firewood. And we asked around, you know, not a lot of people have fireplaces, so, you know, guaranteed, you know, dry fir, blah, blah, blah. It came and I was like, well, that's not fur, and it ain't dry. And sometimes it's hard to tell if you don't have a moisture meter, which I don't have, but, you know, it didn't look dry. I put a log in, it was not dry. But I had the option to say, well, I'll just use baseboard heat for a year and let it season. But I've since upgraded my wood stove and stuff, but it's still that supply thing is, you know, I mean, it's been the issue for as long as I've had a wood stove here in the valley. And I Googled firewood suppliers in BC, and there's only a few of them. One happens to be in Salmon Arm, where I just spent a couple of days last week, and they have a company that does it there, but it's for sale, so maybe there's an opportunity. But I think that, you know, having some sort of closed loop system so that we, you know, because it's the only way to have that wood certified that it is seasoned, because I think one of the comments that, I mean, we could, as Montreal's done, ban the fireplaces today, but there's all the stuff that's out there in our community, so trying to find that good source of wood is probably one of the things that we can all work together on. So I want to thank you guys for acknowledging that, and with that, I'll take a vote on receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? And you guys pass. So,
Thank you very much.
All right. So I only got one joke for that. So,
Thank you.
all right. Our presentation from CERMAC has been, what do you call it? Moved to the other CVRD. Yeah, exactly. So we'll move right into the management report. If somebody would like to move receipt. Excellent. Are there any questions? And Director Frisch?
Oh, you know what? Wrong one. I was waiting for the next one.
Okay. Any questions or comments regarding the management report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes. Next, we have the Comox Valley Transit Management Advisory Committee minutes. And Director Frisch.
Yeah, I just wanted to say how encouraged I was to read this, because it has some things that I was really interested in learning about, and I see they're coming down the pipeline. I just had a quick question about bus number 21 and 22 and which one that was. Does the CIA know that? He probably wrote it in this morning or something.
Not offhand.
We can walk over.
It's not a problem. You don't have to find the answer. I just found it interesting, because I'd like to know so I can tell people when they ask me about transit stuff in town.
We'll get back to you.
Yeah, I'll ask you some other time. Thanks.
Excellent. And probably an email to the board would be useful, and then maybe we all got the info. Seeing that's the only question, all those in favor? Oh, no, it's totally fine. Director Morin.
Is there any more specific information on electric buses other than in the next several years? Do we have anything that's a little bit more?
We are coming back to you with a report on transit, and these questions I will ask Mike Zabarski to address for you. There was the recent announcement from the province, and then it's largely driven by them, but I'll ask him to deal with that specifically.
It just seemed a little vague.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for the questions, and all those in favor of receipt. Any opposed? And that passes. Next, we have the permissive tax exemption for Sunnydale Golf Society 2020.
Second.
Excellent. And does staff want to speak to this at all?
No, thank you very much. These are the next two items, the Sunnydale and the Union Bay Historical Society, are both an annual event in which these organizations apply for permissive tax exemption. They qualify for the exemption, and the discretion is at the boards. And if you have any specific questions about the organizations or otherwise, we can answer that. It is not uncommon for societies operating golf courses to receive tax exemptions from local governments. I can think of other examples in other regional districts where this is the common practice.
All right. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? That passes. All right. Who would like to read out that recommendation? Thank you, Director Frisch.
Yeah, so I'll move that pursuant to section, sorry, are we on Union Bay, or are we on nowhere on Sunnydale?
Sunnydale Golf.
Thank you. Move that pursuant to section 391 4A of the Local Government Act, a bylaw be forwarded to the board for adoption by October 31st of this year, allowing a permissive tax exemption for 100% of the taxable land and improvements for 2020 for the property for Sunnydale Golf Course, let's say, with the exception of the portion of Class 6 business other related to the pro shop operations.
All right, and that's been firsted and seconded. And no further questions or comments. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes. And next we have the permissive tax exemption for Union Bay Historical Society. Excellent. And do you want to speak to this at all, or same?
Again, really covered in the previous comments.
Yep. Having heard that, all those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? And there's a recommendation. All right. And so it is a similar recommendation as the previous one to provide a tax exemption. Director Hamir.
Great. That pursuant to section 3921C of the Local Government Act, a bylaw be prepared providing for a permissive tax exemption for the taxation year 2020 for an amount equal to 100% of the net taxable land and improvements for section 32, the Union Bay Historical Society.
Okay. Thanks for doing that. See no questions or comments. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes. And now we're on to CVRD grant funding services. Excellent, and I'll pass it over to staff.
Great, thanks very much, and I'll call on Doug DeMarzo to provide a summary of this report and answer any of the questions.
Thank you. Through the chair to the directors, I'm here to speak quickly to the grant review here. The CVRD administers several services where the grant review is relevant. At the ASC yesterday, a lot of those services were covered, and they were hoping to move that forward at the board meeting, supported for approval. What we're focusing on here today is really the 600 grant service. Really, the grant service is really about enabling outside organizations to continue operating either through capital or even operational dollars. It's been very widely used throughout the community, as you may see in your appendices of all the agencies that have utilized these services. In order to keep this moving forward, we are presenting some opportunities to look at a grant criteria review, and this really helps drive the transparency of the process and allows other organizations that may not be aware maybe the opportunity to see if they fit into this potential criteria. It's really about aligning the projects with the CVRD's core values and their board strategic plan, again, promoting that transparency, equal opportunity, and also about providing greater certainty to longstanding recipients. The real purpose here is not to make the process more convoluted, but to make it more predictable as well. Looking at the 600 service here, we just think of it from the financial standpoint. And that's primarily, we don't understand completely the full impact on an annual basis, and each of these services is really unique, but the idea is to keep it within these requisitions that we've seen, and that's one of the guiding documents and guiding processes that we'll continue to lead through. If you have any questions specifically around the financials, Kevin can help me out here during the questioning period. I'm just trying to bring in the background and how we have gotten to this place, I guess. In February 2019, the ASC had us look at moving forward with an arts and cultural grant review, and upon that we determined that we should look through all the grant processes to look for consistencies or inconsistencies. And from that point to August, we realized that it might be a good time to look at all our grant programs and also review our service establishment bylaws. Now we're into August, which is where we're looking for board support to move ahead and just to obtain support to proceed with the grant review, coming back to you in the future. I think the key is there's a lot of people and organizations in the community that rely on these grants. So we really feel there's a need for an outreach period to speak to members of those organizations who receive grants and to some that don't receive the grants, and find out where some of the gaps and holes are, and to find out how we can serve them perhaps better. So we're really looking September to November kind of window to do that reach out. And then at that point, we'll be looking at other BMPs and looking at reviewing the guidelines internally again with interested parties and taking all the financial considerations into all, well, factoring all the financial considerations into the way we want to proceed forward. And then looking at coming back to the board for approval with recommendations on how to proceed. There'll be a lot of time. We don't want to rush this process. So I think one of the key things to note is we're really looking to be in the 2021 budget process. So for the majority of next year, the grant programs will basically be running as they have in the past, given that our budgeting process is starting to come up quite soon. This allows for a good community conversation around it, and it allows for us to have a thorough analysis of other best management practices around BC, and even looking at how other nonprofits administer grants is another good window to just look at those BMPs. So with reference to the 600 service, the recreation grants, I think that's where we're moving forward and looking for your support to at least undertake this grant review and report back to you with some recommendations and perhaps some decisions later in 2020.
Excellent, thanks very much. And we have a question or comment from Director Frisch.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, I think it's a great idea, and I could come up with lots of questions, but I think right now I'm just happy to support you guys doing the work and coming back and letting us know what you think, and it sounds like you're going to go to the community as well, which is really great, so thanks.
All right, I don't see any other questions or comments, so all those in favor, any opposed? That's receipt, and then there is a recommendation. And Director Frisch.
Yeah, I'll move that staff review the recreation grant service for the purpose of developing guidelines for applicants, ensuring a transparent process and equal opportunity to funding, determining if some initiatives should be funded by contract rather than relying on grant processes, evaluating the possibility of consolidation of services or grant programs, and furthermore that staff bring back a report reviewing the above and providing recommendations.
Excellent, thanks for that. Any questions or comments on the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor, any opposed, and that passes. Next we have the 2019-2020 Strategic Priorities Chart. Excellent.
And just briefly, this is the current summary that we provide for you on a regular basis to show where we are at with the strategic priorities that were identified in your last planning process last October. And it is not a summary of all the projects on the go, but those that relate to strategic priorities. And as the board approved at a previous meeting, we will be revamping this process and undertaking your next strategic planning session in mid-October to revamp the list. And in doing so, we are following through with some of the commitments to provide you further information on sustainability, on a scorecard, the regional growth strategy, and its relevance. So we will be informing you of those matters before your next strategic planning process following up from this.
All right. And are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, any opposed, and that passes. And next, under new business, we have herbicides, Comox Valley Regional District property. Somebody like to, Director Hamir? All right, does somebody want to move that?
Move receipt.
Thanks. Excellent. Director Hamir.
Sure, thank you. So thanks, everyone. Just a little bit of background. This came to my attention through some emails from the community when our staff were creating a new parking lot in Seal Bay Park where the use of Roundup was used. And at the time, you know, I think there was a lot of upset in the community. You know, we have a lot more information about what the detriments of using this herbicide are. And so on talking to staff, I think we came up with some other options that were possibly not part of the toolkit, but can be now. We actually have a farmer in the valley who does rent out his goat herd to do weed control. So that's a pretty nice option, I think benefits both parties. So with that in mind, that we have other possibilities instead of using herbicides, I have put this motion forward so that staff can look at the other alternatives, keeping in mind that we would still be using herbicides in the case that we have a noxious weed like Japanese, although I've heard goats love Japanese knotweed, just saying that. Or giant hogweed, those are the two noxious weeds that we find in the valley. But I'm open to any, if people have questions regarding the motion or the change in policy, I'm happy to speak to.
All right. Director Grant.
Well, I'm just, in reading this, is this meant to be directed just at regional district property? So it's not to do with golf courses or any of those types of things?
I mean, this is just a direction for staff, like for when we as CVRD are requiring to remove some type of vegetation, that we choose other alternatives rather than the herbicides. Yeah, so it has nothing to do with private property or where we don't have jurisdiction.
Okay, thanks.
And seeing, alternate director Scoville.
Two questions, actually. The first one being with regard to at the end that the motion be referred to the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board for feedback. I'd be curious to know exactly what their role is and the kind of feedback that we would expect to get, like what the purpose of that feedback is, and then I'll continue with the other question.
So, yeah, maybe
Want me to
staff.
answer?
Well, yeah, no, staff would have a better.
Okay. The Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board includes the Strathcona Regional District Directors as well as our directors in managing our waste management facilities. They're very sensitive to when this board adopts policies that apply to them, that they would like some input. And we're just aware that there is the possibility that they may wish, or that service might have the need for this. So just as a matter of respect, we will refer it to them for their input. But having said that, I have consulted with our staff, and it is not common practice for us to use pesticide or herbicides, I should say, on our waste management properties.
Okay. And then the second part of my question, which is closely related, is do we not have qualified staff for the regional district who make these judgments? Because what concerns me is that politicians deciding to ban something takes the discretion away from the people who are actually qualified to make that decision. So I'd like to better understand the qualifications of our staff to handle this themselves.
Our park staff are those that have utilized these methods in the past. They will consult with qualified professionals where required in order to ensure it's done properly and to the most limited amount possible. But basically what we do as staff is we take the values and priorities of the board and apply those to the initiatives that we have. If this board determines it's a priority that we err on the side of caution when it comes to herbicides, then that tells us that the financial consideration that we might otherwise give to finding the most economical solution isn't weighed as heavily as the value that our community has to be very cautious about the use of herbicides. So it is relevant for the board to help provide that direction on what we apply to these decisions in this manner. But there are implications. But having said that, the director has brought forward this proposed motion for staff's consideration. We feel that we can accommodate it without a dramatic impact or infringement on the decisions that we make. Otherwise, we would be giving you a heads up or a warning of that.
Okay.
All right, and I don't see any further comments or questions, so we'll vote on receipt. All those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? And then we have the requested action. I don't know if I'll have you read the whole thing out. Maybe the therefores.
Sure. So, therefore, be it resolved that the CVRD Board directs staff to prepare an amended pesticide use on regional district property policy, prohibiting the use of synthetic herbicides for the control of invasive weeds on CVRD property. And further, this resolution and the draft policy be referred to the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board for feedback prior to consideration of adoption by the CVRD Board.
I'll second.
Excellent. And again, any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And, one opposed?
Got it.
Okay. And I think there are no media here for questions. I do see an empty press table. And we have no in camera, so one thing left.
Termination.
Excellent.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And we are out of here. Wow.